Maddie was just yesterday looking at booking that vault room at the Capitol for next year. And the dates that we wanted were available. So we're going to double check a few things and get that date out for you too. But we are going to have that legislative breakfast in the Capitol one of these years, I promise. I just want to confirm that you can see my screen that looks like a PowerPoint slide with a picture of the Capitol on it. Is that correct? All right, good. It's a little bit different when you're trying to do a presentation on Zoom. You can't see what everybody else sees, and so that's why I ask. But again, welcome to the legislative briefing today. I just want to go over a couple of things. Oh, here, let's do this. Before we jump right in. All right, there we go. Just a reminder about our legislative process. How do we get here? Number one, the first thing, of course, that happens is the members submit resolutions. And then the resolutions committee takes a look at those makes recommendations. Hang on one second here. Okay, I have two screens that are doing different things. The resolution committee meets, reviews those, makes recommendations to the mod board. The mod board reviews that report and then can make additional recommendations, and then they forward that to the mod members. Then, of course, we vote on those resolutions. Then they go to the legislative committee, who reviews everything on the books and decides to recommend a platform to the mod board. Goes back to the mod board, they review the committee recommendations and approve a platform for the upcoming year. Then, that direction goes to the lobbyist, Ray Bone, and to me, and we work on those issues with assistance from you, the mod members, and many, many partners. So that's where we're at right now. But I did just want to remind everyone about how this is really a member-driven process and committee-driven. And of course, the one step that we're also in right now is the review process. So taking a look at how are things going, and then, how can we make it better for next year? You're gonna have to give me a second here. For some reason, these slides are not advancing on one of my screens, but not another. Let me change how I am sharing. Sorry about this. I didn't realize I needed to practice this. Let's try this. There we go. Okay. So a couple of things that we did identify this past year, one of the things was, how do we handle emergency resolutions? We did discover last year at the convention that the process that we were using was not sound. We were practicing how we wanted to handle emergency resolutions in a way that was not consistent with our bylaws. So we absolutely are addressing that. And the governance committee actually met last week to review the bylaws and to come up with some different options about how we can officially process things that come up in the middle of the year or anytime during the year that when it does not fall within our calendar of handling resolutions. So look forward to that. They are putting together recommendations that'll get forwarded to the board, who will consider it. And if there is a bylaws change, that would, of course, come back to the members in December to vote on. Some other things we're taking a look at is, how can we get more done with our limited resources? How can we make our members feel more empowered to be our biggest advocates? How do we unify the members so that we have consistent messaging? Because when we have the same message told over and over, it ends up to be more powerful. So the legislative committee has working on that, and they made some recommendations for how we could move forward on that. One was to create a communications plan, build templates that we all would use to share our stories that we could use with legislators, expanding the regional chapters to the rural areas. We have the Metro Mod that meets, they're a chapter of Mod, but making sure that we have those chapters all across the state to be able to discuss issues and stay on top of those. And then setting up what has been coined an agency action squad. There's a number of different administrative issues that we need to address with the state agencies, and trying to figure out how we can use more people to get more of those issues taken care of. So I just wanted to a huge thank you out to the legislative committee. The chair is Jackie Anderson. And then you will see that the committee is made up of managers and administrators, which is a nice blend there. And they have met a couple of times and will continue to meet throughout the year. And at the end of the legislative session, then they'll take a look at what got done and what do we need to do over the, what should we recommend to do over the summer? What would be the initial platform for next year? Just kind of draft something out. And then of course, after the convention, they'll take a look at any new resolutions and consider those as well. And so once the legislative committee sends it to the board of directors, I just want to remind you who is on your board of directors. You all have 3 reps assigned to your region. Feel free to call them, visit with them about issues that are concerning to you. I think this is an underutilized path to get what you want and need out of the organization. If you have ideas on how we can be better, absolutely work with those representatives. We are now meeting once a month. The digital and virtual platform has allowed us to have shorter meetings, but more frequent meetings. And that's really been nice to just continually keep things moving. The legislative team that we have, I mentioned Ray Bone is our lobbyist, and I'm on that team, of course. And the MAUD members, you are a huge part of that team. We can set things up for our members, and then we really need the members to come in behind us too, and continually throughout the year work with your legislators, invite them to events, and that's how we can really get these things moving. And then your legislators, they are a key piece of this. One example with the levy, it's really tricky when we try to pass a levy increase for mainly for rural members, but their legislators aren't willing to be the ones to put their name on it. But anytime you can continue to network with them and tell your story is when we can gain traction. Some of the other groups that we have that we work with regularly, of course, a huge shout out to the Red River Watershed Management Basin. We are on the phone in meetings with them all the time. I just got off the phone with their lobbyist and our lobbyist and Senator Weber. And there is a new person there too. Brent Erdahl is a new part-time lobbyist that is helping track some bills. So that is a huge asset to have more bodies on our team. The Minnesota Association of Soil and Water Conservation Districts, they have their executive director and assistant director who is mainly focuses on legislative, and then they also hire a lobbying firm to help with some of them. So we tap into those resources when we can. The counties have several different associations. The 3 that I've got listed here, we meet with on a weekly basis, along with Soil and Water too. But Brian Martinson, Steve Novak, Dan Larson, Matt Massman, you may recognize some of those names. The Board of Soil and Water Resources, we've got the executive director, the 3 assistants, and then Megan Lennon is assigned as the person to keep track of the legislation, keep track of the hearings, make sure that everyone knows where everything is moving. So that's been a help for us also to keep track of all of the legislation. There's over 2,000 bills in each body right now. And then there's other watershed lobbyists that we work with from time to time. And then of course, nonprofits. They often reach out to us, but we will reach out to them too if we have issues where we know they can help. So what are our top priorities? Hopefully you've seen these and these are not a surprise to you. Our top 3 priorities that we identified at the beginning of the year were to those clean water funds and keeping those really targeted and moving more and more to having that fund to be used for programs and projects and less about staff capacity, especially at the state level. Of course, the increasing the general fund levy limit that has been there for years. Hopefully we can take that off one of these years, and then finding more money for the flood hazard mitigation project. Typically that's our bonding, and there's been a lot of activity on bonding discussions, so there may be a bonding bill this year, which would be great. Then there were four priorities that we identified as that we would take a role in supporting, and those were taking a look at the DNR's ability to designate public waters, to take those on and off the list, and having an ability for someone to appeal that designation. And there are several bills right now that actually deal with that. One I just saw yesterday about putting a moratorium on some of those changes, and a couple other ideas to handle those. There is some legislation about wake boats. um, the deal with the lake boats is, though, the Lake Association believes, or the Minnesota Lakes Association, that came forward from the wake boat industry, hoping that if they can set some standards in place right now before we have the science completed, that maybe they will be able to get away with less. It's the bill is more strict than what's in there now, but the stance of the lake associations is to say, hey, let's just wait until the university finishes their research before we decide what numbers we're going to put into law. So we need to have a few more conversations about that as to how strong a stance we're taking on that, or which way we fall, because it has come into question. On the surface, it certainly looks like it's a bill that provides more protection for our shorelines, but it may not be what it appears. The certified salt applicator bill is in play again this year. And then one of the top priorities we listed was storage in the Minnesota River Basin. There's a number of storage bills out there right now, and we're having a lot of discussions as to which ones may be better than others, and just trying to make sure that we get, if we move forward with new storage programs, that it is that it will work the best for us and be the most efficient. There were a couple of bills there were a couple of things that we knew we needed to look out for right away to play defense. We had a resolution from 2019 that dictated spending watershed dollars on political boundaries. I have not seen anything come up on that this year. And then also the Developers Bill of Rights that was around for a few years, that took away some of our abilities to manage water. Haven't seen anything on that yet either. But then, of course, we always have to watch for bills that impact watershed management. I'm going to give you a couple of examples. This one emerged. Representative Steve Green introduced this, and he would like to take away the eminent domain powers of watershed districts. Now, we don't necessarily have any policy on whether we would support keeping this or whatnot, but we do have a consistent policy or belief that when our statutory authorities are challenged or going to be taken away, that we would oppose a reduction in authorities. So this one is a pretty safe thing that we can and say that we would oppose this. There are no hearings scheduled for this, and it has been introduced in the House and the Senate. Another example was one that just popped up, and it's an idea that Representative Paul Torkelson has crafted, and it did come up last year at the, but it didn't go anywhere. I mean, nothing went anywhere last year, but hardly. Whether or not we should fund a study to see what could happen, what it would take to do a voluntary merger of SWCDs and WDs. And this would be once they've completed a one watershed, one plan. So this is an example of where it's a little bit harder. How do you know what your members think? I certainly have heard a range of thoughts on this. So there is a hearing scheduled tomorrow and I will be testifying on that. And I met with the Soil and Waters. They were not behind this. We were not behind this. This is purely this was an idea from the representative. Both of us are asking for more capacity. SWCDs are asking for, the general fund revenue source for capacity, and we continually ask for the ability to raise more revenue through our tax levy. So I think it's a natural idea to think about, well, how can we combine these? They do similar things, they have similar missions. Would that solve problems? And so we're putting together our thoughts on that. We'll certainly point out that we don't have policy on it. I think it would be great to be able to sit down and maybe talk about this a little bit before we would move right into a study, and perhaps flesh out some details and maybe get some buy-in to whether or not we should do this, or even if we're asking the right questions. So tomorrow, if you want to if you want to watch that, that'll be on YouTube tomorrow at 1 o'clock. Then we have a whole host of resolutions that we would really start by handling with meetings at different agencies. So the second one there, soil health goal for Metro watershed management plans. So that was a new one from last year. We would start by talking with Bowser. The temporary water storage on DNR wetlands. We have a commitment from the DNR to sit down and talk to us about that issue. That was from the commissioner, and the assistant commissioner have agreed to do that after session. And so we will move forward with that. But as you can see, there's a lot of, and this is just a list of the ones that came through resolutions. There's many other issues that need conversations and that are continuing to go on. So it's a big list, and we will tackle what we can. Is that the? So I guess if there's any questions, I guess one thing we are going to move into a training next, a training piece with the Cedar River Watershed District, and they are going to talk about how they work with their legislators all year long. They invested in hiring a full-time person to tell their stories and to get their messages out, and they have some phenomenal different ideas to get their story out. And I want you to think about, of all those issues we just talked about, which one are you the most passionate about? Which one's is the most important that gets done this year? And as Tim and Justin go through their information, think about, how could I do something similar like with them to get our message across? And give that some thought. And if there are, I would take any questions right now. We do have a lobbyist update with Ray after the presentation from Tim and Justin. But Maddie, are there any questions that came up in the chat?
No, we don't have any questions at this moment. We just had some comments, but no questions. So I think we can have Justin take over from here.
All right, well, we certainly will be around for a while here. So if you have questions, feel free to reach out to us at any time, and remember to reach out to your board members as well. And with that, I am really excited to have Justin and Tim next on this agenda. Over the last year or last few years, we've been working on Bowser Academy and trying to make that content a little bit better for watershed districts. And we did our own survey this last year, just asking watershed districts what they thought of Bowser Academy. And I will tell you that far and away, the best comments came from the presentation that you're about to see. They thought this was a phenomenal collection of ideas. And I thought, wow, great. Let's share this information with everyone and get that out. So Justin and Tim, thanks so much for joining us, and I will give you the floor.
Well, thanks a lot, Emily. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Justin Hansen with Cedar River Watershed District down in Austin. So we're right down on near the Iowa border. And I think Emily did a great job of kind of teeing up our discussion today. And what we're gonna talk about a little bit with the importance of communication and relationships. And Tim's gonna talk a little bit more about those outreach strategies, and I'll probably focus just a little bit more on some of the observations that I've made over the years with building some of those relationships. So I really appreciate the opportunity to be here. It's good to see you folks. I've had met some of you. I was in the governance meeting last week, so there was some new folks that I've been interacting with, which has been good. You got a really good committee working on your governance language. You've also got really good people working for you in St. Paul. Ray and Emily do an excellent job, and I'm not telling you guys anything you don't know, but they do an amazing job of staying engaged and listening and communicating the needs of a very wide spectrum of different watershed district needs. So that there's a little bit of a challenge to that, as you guys can imagine, and I think they just do an excellent job. So I'm going to talk a little bit about maybe our effective relationships and how we try to be engaged with our folks locally so that the message in St. Paul is being transferred. And I'm not going to talk about anything. For most of the stuff I talk about, it's not going to be any new ground shattering information. It really comes back to relationships, right? So there's just a theme about trust and communication here, and just the different ways that we've engaged with that. So I think the saying was progress happens at the speed of trust, but relationships are more than trust, right? It's the ongoing communication that kind of supports that trust. So I'd like to change that up a little bit. So as Emily said, I'm the administrator for Cedar River. Tim is the outreach coordinator. This is our team. Communication has gotten really interesting over the last year, and in some ways there's been some challenges, and in other ways I think we've really benefited from it. And it's coincidental completely, but I have a meeting with two of my legislators at 3 o'clock, and I'm not going to move from my seat, right? I'm gonna transition right from this meeting into that meeting. So there is something to be said about the accessibility of everybody, but our legislators specifically. I found it really easy to schedule meetings with them. So something you might want to keep in mind. It is easier just to do check-ins. Now, I don't think Ray and Emily would say that because they're used to knocking on the door and poking their head in. But for us outstate, I think that it has presented some unique opportunities. I do think it's important, for the projects, initiatives, and goals that we have outstate. It is important to have a presence in St. Paul. Ray and Emily do a lot of that communication for us, but we're all part of their home base, and I can't reinforce how important that is for them to see familiar faces from back home. Because really our best stories are told in the field on project locations, at the coffee shop when you run into them uptown. Those engagement opportunities where it's not necessarily loaded with a presentation or a hearing. And that's what we're good at, right? Is telling our local stories. So I wanted to step back for just a second and talk a little bit about an old friend, Leo Redding, who I came to know after his time was actually done in the House of Representatives. But I was brand new to the district, and when I was introduced to Leo, he was just one of our cooperators, and he had a lot of enthusiasm and a lot of passion, and he awarded me some time just to spend listening to him and understanding kind of what his goals and objectives were. He had a passion for water. But what I really found out of that was I think I understood, legislators to be fairly disconnected, that they had, political aspirations and something that wasn't necessarily connected to me. And Leo showed me that that's not true. He didn't have the answers to every question, but he was very curious. He also believed strongly in the areas that we were working on. We were working on some flood control projects on his property, and it was a great experience for me to understand just how human and normal these people are, right? So, and all I've seen ever since then has backed up that with other legislators. At the core of who they are, they're just like us. So I think one of the things I really wanted to focus on this afternoon, the little bit of time we have, is how bipartisan our work is. How great is it that we work in a field that meets the objectives of left and right priorities, and the work that we do falls into both categories, and all of those folks can support the work that we do. So sometimes it gets lost. I know that gets lost in St. Paul, but and we take on some strategies a little bit. I suppose there's a little bit of a disclaimer here. Anytime you talk about politics, you take a chance that you're gonna set somebody off. But if I just ask you guys to play along with me for a little bit on some of this, because this is very high level general terms, but I have found that it's kind of effective when we're communicating when you have just a small amount of time, you need to communicate and make a connection on your messaging. So our work to Democrats, they are pro-environment, right? So our work has certainly an environmental angle to it. The flood work that we're doing is absolutely connected to some of the climate change objectives that Democrats are focused on. They have a general support of tax funding. Emily talked about, trying to get the tax limits raised, to support local projects. That probably resonates maybe a little bit more with some Dems than Republicans. But in general, they support tax funding to implement projects that improve kind of the greater good of a community or a watershed community. On the other side, when we're talking with legislators, we really focus on that local control. Is there anything more local than a watershed district, right? We are a special purpose unit of government that was established for a very specific reason. It's efficient, I think. We don't, the higher you go up the ladder, it feels like, the less connected you get with the people. And I think the Republican folks that I work with, that resonates, that we're efficient government. And our tax dollars, so if we're going to levy, we're going to use those levy dollars to serve the people who pay those taxes. And so sometimes it helps to just kind of reinforce these different themes with the audience that you have, and so that you can kind of connect on some of the objectives that they prioritize. One of the things that I've really thought was interesting over the years is the theater of politics, even at a state level. Obviously, we understand how that plays out at a national level, but I used to get into a situation where I felt like feedback I was getting from legislators was almost like it was personal. And I suppose it'd be personal because a lot of times if you're getting feedback, it's directed to you. But I've been in hearings where, looking back on it now, I was getting critical comments about something that wasn't necessarily related to even my presentation, but it might have been a shot across the room at another individual. Or I've been in the field when a legislator has really made a big scene about something, and at the time, it's like, wow, that's so weird because that's not really what I'm talking about. But so sometimes they want to play up for the audience and make a little bit of a scene. What I think when we run into these cases, I just like to encourage you folks to operate with confidence, because another example, I'll share kind of my dirty laundry a little bit. I had it happen in a hearing once where I had our capital improvement plan was in front of them, and a legislator put me on the spot and very animated, came down on me and said, "Where is your plan? What are you doing?" And in the hearing in real time, I'm looking at him and I'm thinking, "You're looking right at my plan. Like, what are we talking about?" And so I stammered a little bit, and as I was trying to get my bearings, and it set off kind of a chain reaction where they could kind of, I could sense that, well, maybe he doesn't know what he's talking about. And then that left an opening for folks to pile on, where, if you just operate with confidence and believe in what you're saying, and don't be afraid to reinforce your points. We don't have to apologize for our work. I mean, the things that as appointed board members, you've been appointed with, you have a certain responsibility for that appointment. As a staff, we have the same responsibilities, and so we have a right to be confident in the work that we're talking about, and to feel like that's worth moving forward. One of the things I've seen a lot, and I've picked up in communication with other people, is the expectations of these folks when we're working with them. I think because they're elected and because they serve, there's a sense that they're up there for us. They do get pulled in a lot of different directions, and they have a lot of different priorities and things that they need to be focused on. And if you can kind of approach it like you're trying to help them, you serve them, they serve you. When I started doing more of that, I noticed things got a little more productive. I've noticed that when they understand your struggle, and when you understand their struggle, right? This is just like any relationship, right? Then you kind of share a struggle, and then you share the coming out of that struggle part of things too. So I think it's really important to, again, it comes back, a lot of it is just to communicate and listening too. Another thing I've watched in different presentations or discussions with legislators is that we assume that because they were effective enough to get elected, right? Like they know what's going on, and that's certainly not the case a lot of times. So we don't assume that they're experts, and especially in our highly technical, complicated water management work. So if you approach it like you're approaching a discussion with a fifth grader, that's not to be demeaning in any way. It's a good frame of mind to have when you go into a discussion with those legislators. They don't want to feel dumb either, and they don't, especially if you're in a group. So talking about your work in simple terms and thinking about it like they're a fifth grader helps get that message, so that you're really hitting the most important parts of the message anyway. So have some fun with some of this stuff too. There are unique opportunities. Legislators are moving around the state and involved in different activities. We were part of the 2019 governor hunt, so we hosted a number of different legislators and cooperators around the state, which was a lot of fun. We have some unique relationships with Riverland College and some local agronomists that we've partnered up with on some projects. And so bringing those groups together and kind of providing a platform and a message to share with legislators about that collaboration and partnership. Here's a big one, right? So this is how you make your work real. And the easiest way to make something real is to connect it with people and stories. And so anybody that's heard me talk has heard me talk about my niece, Addie, right? Or at least in a presentation setting. I talk about Addie all the time. And going back to a comment Emily made earlier, reinforcing a similar message over and over and over again. So, my hope here is that some people roll their eyes and say, oh, I've heard that 10 times before, but the other side is to reinforce your message. So when I talk about our storage goals and the impact of our water resources, I use this example of Addie and how, when we go to the wave pool, she likes to wade out. And then when the water comes in, the waves come up and it knocks her on her butt. And then there's a part of the story that has some relationship to, our watershed getting knocked on its butt. And I can tell you, I will give a presentation. We'll talk about projects. We'll talk about budgets. And every time I get to the Addie story, the eyes come up, right? So they get out of their phone and they start paying attention. So look for those kind of opportunities to tell a story about a person. I know it seems so simple, but it actually, it's pretty effective. These unique opportunities, don't be afraid. Tim's going to talk more about some of this stuff in his presentation, but there's so much stuff that happens that people don't see in our work. So don't be afraid to hold a press conference, invite legislators out. I know that many of you do, right? You get them out on site and take advantage of that. But having them see your projects, I think, is so important. Connecting on goals. So two stories, Representative Torkelson, Representative Hausman, Republican and Democrat. We talked about Torkelson and his storage goals just right before I started. So an example with it, when we're talking with Paul, he understands storage a little bit, right? He knows that it's a priority for the Mid River Valley. And so we try to connect on that as well. One funny story about him though, is we were in a presentation, we were out in the field, and he came down on me about, I don't even remember what all the stuff was. It was a number of questions, and he really came after me. Now my representative at the time was a Democrat, and there was probably a lot of Democrats in the audience. And after he came down on me on these storage projects, he pulled me aside at lunch and he said, "Oh, you know what, Justin? I think we're really on the right track here. This is actually a pretty good idea." So I got caught up a little bit in the theater of some of this stuff. But you understood out of that discussion, okay, I get a better idea of how he approaches storage. And example with Alice Hausman. So Representative Hausman is a big believer in the Reinvest in Minnesota program. And we started out on a tour, and we were talking about storage projects and our flow reduction. And she made a pivot into RIM, right? So that was her program. And so we pivot with her, right? And you talk about, okay, so this is how RIM is connected to our works and our work and our storage goals. And just being able to roll with that. When we got done, then Alice just had a lot of really positive, good feedback about that experience, because we were able to reinforce her goals and then communicate it in a way that kind of made her a champion, right? She took that forward and built on that. And for years after, we still talk about that, right? So that making a connection that kind of goes beyond the meeting. Connecting with these momentum issues, playing politics a little bit, right? So climate change is a priority issue. So relating our work, helping to connect them with our work. Our work doesn't fix climate change, but it's certainly impacted our communities, and our watershed resources are impacted by that. And these are making it connect with a momentum issue, I think has been kind of effective. So at the end of the day, there's nothing more powerful than a personal relationship. I mean, if you can have, what you want is to get to a position with your legislator where they trust you enough that when they get a question in St. Paul, they're texting us, right? Or they're calling us to validate questions or, or beliefs that they have. And all that's just a trust. That's just relationship. It's just like friends, family, anything else that we do to build that up. Every farm, forest, lake, or stream has a person affected by that resource. So talking about the people, not necessarily the metrics, but the people. And then in any setting, show your passion. You folks do this. You're not, anybody on this call is in it for the big bucks, right? You guys do this because you believe in it. Let that personal connection show, because it's infectious. I'm just going to talk about one example of how, it's important for us to be more visible. That is specific to the Clean Water Fund that Emily touched on earlier. As that funding starts to translate into projects, the expectations for all of us go up a little bit. And I just want to encourage us to be telling those stories, to really be highlighting the good work that's coming out of the watershed-based funding, to show the leveraged funding that's coming out of that. And there are so many good stories. If we can just relay those stories, the collaboration part alone has just been incredible, right? I mean, the way that we're working with cities and SWCDs is different than it's ever been. So let's see, with that, I think as we kind of transition a little bit, there's any questions kind of on what I've been talking about, I can take those now, as Tim's gonna take you through more of the outreach strategies and some of the things we've been doing to try to make it a little easier to connect. So Maddie, I'm not seeing anything on the chat. Does that mean we don't have anything new?
No, I don't see anything either.
Right. So I'm gonna stop share. And then Tim, you can take it from there. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Justin.
All right. Thanks, Justin. And just a reminder, how much time do I have here? Make sure I don't go over time.
You are good, Tim. Share
Mhm.
away. You have so much good information, so we will make time. If
Okay,
it's so long, we'll just cut Ray short, and no one will complain about that. So
sure. Well, I better be entertaining and informative here.
I know that you are.
I just want to start out with a little bit about my background. My background's in print journalism. That's what I majored in college. And I was a news reporter for the Post-Bulletin newspaper, a Rochester-based newspaper, but working out of the office here in Austin, Minnesota for about 7 years. So print journalism was my life for quite a long time, even before becoming a full-time reporter. And then I got into public relations and fundraising, development with a cancer research center here in Austin. That's part of the University of Minnesota. And yes, it is called the Hormel Institute. They do not study spam. That was always the joke there. It is a legit cancer research place. So I got the PR side of things and marketing, more of that experience from those 6 years. And then, 2016, at that same time, 2010, I started doing some outreach consulting for the Cedar River Watershed District. When it was formed in 2007, after our worst ever flood here in Austin, I I covered those floods. I covered the start of the watershed district. And then when I left the newspaper and joined the Hormel Institute, I also connected with the watershed district to try to start moving them into some outreach directions, like starting a Facebook page and pursuing some other things like Adopt a River initiative locally and getting the designation through the state legislature of a state water trail for the Cedar River here in town. 2016 then, Justin reached out very graciously. I'm appreciative of that because I love my job. I'm doing it full time since 2016. So doing water planning and outreach coordination for the Cedar River Watershed District, as well as the Mower County Soil and Water Conservation District. So I want to emphasize, what works down here does not, I'm not saying works everywhere. We all have different backgrounds, different levels of funding, different political situations locally, whether that be local, state, city, county, the watershed district, obviously the board of managers. And we also have different accessibility to media. For example, in Austin, back when I was covering the beginning of the Cedar River Watershed District, I was part of, actually had a competing newspaper against us, which was pretty rare for anywhere, especially in a town of 25,000 people. So we had 2 daily newspapers, 3 TV media outlets, with one of them based in Austin and the other 2 having an Austin dedicated reporter, and then an AM news radio station, a public television station. And so we had more than enough media in Austin. Now, and in the pandemic, we are down to 1 newspaper that now went from 6 days a week down to 2 days a week of publishing. All 3 TV news outlets, the one that was based here is now based out of Rochester. All 3 of them, even the one out of Mason City, Iowa, are really heavily focused on Rochester news, Rochester advertising, everything's Rochester. So we're left then with the AM radio station, which is not a real big powerhouse, but we do get a monthly interview with them and they do read our media releases quite frequently. But so I say all that because things do change. Traditional media and social media, things are changing quite a bit these days. And what we had as a really great situation for media accessibility now is greatly challenged because of the significant growth of Rochester and where they're heading with the Destination Medical Center, and just the struggles with traditional media, especially with newspapers now. So I bring up all that because I emphasize to our staff, as well as anybody else who listens to me, to try to think more of being your own media outlet. Don't rely just on traditional media. So I'll skip down to that third point you see as far as diversify your communication, traditional and social media. So as you know, whether it's talking about where people get their political information from the recent presidential elections, or just every day what they view on their phone, they're getting it from different channels. Some watch a lot of YouTube, some use Facebook, some hate Facebook, so they're on Twitter. Some hate both of those, so maybe they're just on Instagram. And I'm not saying you have to get into every single one of those, but look at generating your own content, gathering the content, like the first bullet point of visuals, and start creating your own media releases, your own, basically media outlet for printed or written material to more of your visual communication too about your watershed. So if that's on Instagram, if you post a photo on Facebook, you can automatically post it on Instagram or Twitter if you want to make it easier. So those are free tools for us. There are ways that you can spend money to use them even better, but I strongly believe in using social media. There are for this the watershed district work because there are negatives with it on the personal side, especially, and there are definitely negatives as with anything on using it on the watershed district business side. But it is, again, a free way for you to get out your message, for people to view it, to share it, and I'll show a little some other ideas with that here in a bit. The whole point, like for bullet point number 2 here, what I'm hoping I'm emphasizing is to over communicate your work. It's easier for us with my media background in our watershed districts board and the SWCD board's support of putting some capacity funds and other funding toward so much outreach effort. But I think now more than ever, with everybody having smartphones, you have a much stronger ability as a staff to get photos and video and work more together to, doesn't have to be a perfect media release, but as long as you're getting information out and you're thinking more about communicating with your public, different things related to, in this case, our watershed district. Because as you over communicate about your work, I mean, your local state legislators, if it gets picked up more regionally or statewide, other state legislators will see it, county commissioners, they need to see and hear about your efforts so that you're consistently in front of them and they're aware of what you're doing, the importance of what you're doing. And some of that's like, I think it was talked about earlier, of, emphasizing messaging or repeating it. For us, it was working with our state legislators to get, in 2010 years ago, the designation of the Cedar River as a state water trail. I use that every single time I do communication for the Cedar River, pretty much every single time. I just need to say it the first time I reference the Cedar River, or if it doesn't fit in that, then, the second or third time I bring it up. But I want to put that in there because it is an important thing that we had done. We're a watershed district without any natural lakes. We have 2 mill ponds created by a dam on the Cedar River, and then a man-made lake on a tributary stream. So the biggest one of them is about 53 water acres. So we don't have a lot in our watershed district for water resources. So that is, the Cedar River is our main water resource. It has a lot of history, has a lot of beauty to it. And we've needed to emphasize those things to our local public because the public over the last few decades got away from that. Me growing up here as well had a different perception of it. That it was too impaired to really care about it, or you shouldn't even touch it. So we don't shy away from what needs to be done to improve water quality, but we also want to work to get the public to buy into it is a resource that's worth enjoying right now and improving. And you can help us out too, whether you pick up trash or you support some of these projects that we're trying to do, like upland storage of stormwater. Some of the outreach tools that we use, as I mentioned, traditional media, the social media with Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, a YouTube channel. It's a great way to upload any videos that you're doing, to have a video library. If you're going to share a video on Facebook, I'd highly recommend keeping those separate, though. Don't share a YouTube link on Facebook because you won't get as many views. It's not as great for the analytics too, to see how much of a reach you're getting. E-newsletters, trying to do more of that on a monthly basis, but it is a challenge, even when in my position of having so much time to dedicate toward outreach. But that is another great way. We use MailChimp.com to send out separate e-newsletters for the watershed district and from our SWCD. We keep our website separate as well. And annual reports, just wrapping up our annual reports for 2020 right now. I'll show you a couple examples of those. Other handouts, like for legislators, we've created 4-page special handouts on using the publisher program. Then you can save that to a PDF to print off and give a physical copy to them, to whomever, or you can put it on, like we use issuu.com, ISSUU.com, and then they can flip through it in a digital format. They can zoom in. It keeps the quality, it's high definition as far as the readability and everything, the pictures, the text. And then you have that easy link to share with others. Specialty tabs, you'll see an example later, I think, too. We have aquatic invasive species money here. Again, as I mentioned, no natural lakes, so we don't have a lot of motorized boating, but we do get about $12,000 a year in AIS funds. So I try to really stretch those dollars by, for example, spending money on a back page ad that will then ensure us of a specialty tab that will ensure us with our local newspaper that we can get this tab printed and we can dictate all the content. I'll write it up, provide the photos. They used to lay it out. Fortunately, now that they don't, that I have that background in newspapers where I can lay out pages, but it is think of those kind of things. And I'm sure a bunch of the watershed districts have AIS money, or your county has AIS money they might be able to tap into, and look for those opportunities that if you're going to do an ad, see if you can maybe open it up to a bigger thing where you can do, again, like a 8-page special tab just on, whatever we want on our watershed district, our projects, our initiatives, the beauty of the watershed. So Facebook, I do not post myself often. So this is just the most recent example because you want to aim for, as I learned at a good, I think it was a state convention in the cities a couple of years ago by somebody with the Mississippi River organization out of Minneapolis, of aiming for at least 1 post per day on Facebook. I used to do maybe 2 or 3 posts per day and maybe skip a day or 2 and then come back and maybe do 2 another day. So trying to be consistent, but trying to if you do 1 post per day, let it kind of breathe so more people have a chance to see it before you post on top of it and maybe knock it out of people's view. So I shared this one because it's just an example of something easy last night where I thought I forgot to post something today. I had not scheduled it, which is a great thing that you're able to do with business pages if you want to fully utilize it, which I need to do better. So I knew I had a photo of this from last year, me with a 4-foot litter grabber. We got with a grant, did a media release on that, worked with some partners like the local library to have 5 of them available. We bought 20 with the grant, have 5 of them available for people to check out. But just a photo, me along a lake smiling, hey, it's easy, it's fun, to help clean our shorelines and keep our waterways clean. And you can't see the text above it, but basically just asking people if they're interested in our Adopt a River initiative or volunteering for a community cleanup, because some people just want to be told when and where to show up and they'll help out, not necessarily organize a cleanup like through Adopt a River, to contact me. The other part I wanted to share on this is the lower left, the insights. So I'm not anti-radio ads. What I don't like though is they can give you some numbers of who you're potentially reaching if you were to do an ad, but it just, I'm not big on radio ads. If it comes up, I usually turn the channel. That's my nature. But so as far as money well spent, again, this is all through free content that I've been doing. We have not advertised on Facebook for several years. So just in the last month, you can see we've reached, how this actually breaks down. I'm sure there's lots of repeated people, but 26,684 people reached. We're up quite a bit in that month. Post engagements quite a bit, and then we've gained 40 new page likes. Since we started about 10 years ago, we're now up to about 2,150 page followers. So it's pretty decent. And I point out too, for example, we're getting, as we've been posting more consistently since I got that good advice at that conference, I think I've seen a good steady uptick in the number of people viewing, liking, sharing our posts. I think it's reaching more people because we're doing it more consistently. There's a great annual fundraiser here in Austin for breast cancer research, the place I used to work, called Paint the Town Pink. They have about 2,000 page followers as well. So kind of similar number of followers. They do this every February. They've done it for about 10 years. And I noticed this year, they'd be posting during February about every day, it seemed like, but just really not getting any traction as far as likes and shares and all that stuff, despite having 2,000 page followers. So I think the problem is that they're more of a seasonal page. They fundraise mainly in February. That's when the bulk of events usually are. And it just, if you're not, basically you're not maintaining it, just like changing the oil on your car. If you're not consistently posting on your page, it's not going to be in front of the people following you. It's going to fall away. They're not going to be engaging with you as much. So if they're not seeing you as often, they're not probably liking your stuff as much or commenting or sharing. So the less engagements they have, then I think the less likely they're going to see your stuff on their newsfeed. The more they're engaged with you, the more likely they'll see your content when you post it. Visuals, that's a huge thing. For Facebook, if you're going to do a Facebook post, put in some sort of photo. If I post the monthly board agenda, I'm going to at least post our logo at the very least, if not, a photo of a board meeting, probably pre-COVID times, the more interesting photo. But visuals are important, especially with projects here. This is one of our bigger upland storage projects. So if I'm communicating about it and I just show the photo on the left saying, hey, it works, look at this, it's holding back water. People really don't have that perspective as far as how deep that water is, um, without the photo on the right, showing people next to it for proper perspective, and showing that same area. At the same rate, when I'll show you uh, our drone that we're able to use, my colleague's a commercial drone pilot. It's been a huge help in communicating, for me, videos and images from drone. But then that gives us an even better and more proper perspective of this project, because I think this is maybe just 1/4 or 1/5, horizontally of how the water is being gathered behind the berm. Visuals also for, I've used AIS money to help, bring Canoemobile down to the Cedar River, and we've gotten over 1,000 kids out on the Cedar paddling in these 10-person canoes. We've missed the last two possibilities of doing it because of COVID. Um, but this was a great opportunity that if you're going to put in that kind of resources, put on an event, um, or anything involving kids or people interacting with your watershed, just make sure to shoot so many photos, take so many videos, and tell your local media to come out to encourage them rather than just submit something. Encourage them, invite them to come out and talk about what a great photo opportunity this would be, or story opportunity. The one on the left, this is one of probably a couple hundred photos I've taken at Canoemobile, but it's one of my favorites. At the time, I wasn't really thinking of how I would use it. Then we hosted a We Are Water Minnesota that statewide traveling exhibit a couple years ago. It's just heavily focused on diversity and promoting inclusion and helping absentee voices and all of that. So I thought this photo, we blew it up for part of our exhibit because it represented so much. People of different races, different cultures, different backgrounds, different ages, and having fun on our river. Despite the rain, they're wearing ponchos. But that's one thing I want to emphasize, is that when you have these photos and videos, I mean, especially, with flooding, those natural disaster events, you take a bunch, because you never know. For me, I've ended up using a lot of stuff, including for legislative communication handouts, that I never thought at the time, like, oh, this would be something to use in talking with our legislators, or trying to get some bonding funds, or to show a resource concern. At the time, it's of interest. You maybe have one idea why you want to take the photos for, but many times I found later, especially creating annual reports and doing other kind of communication, that the more variety you have, the better off you are, and the easier your task is to communicate, whether it be to legislators or to your broader community. So if you don't have ability staffing wise to do a lot of outreach, lean on the public. So if you're short staffed, recruit the public. We do that. I love to shoot photos. I do a ton of it, but it's also great to see what the public sees when they're out using our watershed. Plus, there's a lot of talented people out there, more talented than me. And also, we can't be the eyes and ears everywhere of our watershed. So we learn a lot too from the public, like the bass caught at the kid there on the left. The artistic creativity of the person in the canoe up on one of our mill ponds, really planning ahead for sunset up there, and getting that angle just above the water on the side of the canoe. These are all submitted by the public, and we did that through a Cedar Scenes weekly photo contest. So just as I was thinking of maybe backing out of it last year, because it can be a lot of work, and part of that's on me because of how we post on Facebook. I want to make sure those who submit, mostly people could see all those photos without having to click to see the additional ones. But I'm really glad that I did end up bringing it back this year, especially with COVID and people trying to use the local resources here more than ever before, it seemed. So you can see, compared to, out of all the 4 years, this past year was by far, I mean, just easily our best year. And that was with it being the second shortest stretch of Cedar Scenes that we've done. I haven't been consistent of making it let's say a 20-week contest every year. It's just kind of varied and when we're ready to roll with it, having the kayak lined up and all that stuff. But despite it being shorter than the previous 2 years, it crushed it as far as the number of individual participants and overall images. So if if you add up all of those, I mean, we're getting over almost 1,300 photos of our watershed that we now have in our archives to use in whatever kind of communication we want to do. I've got dozens of fish photos and of carp, bass, northern, um, some unexpected rainbow trout. Before we had them stocked here last year, they got some rainbow trout in the Cedar River that snuck out through, I think, a flood event from somebody's privately stocked pond. So there's all sorts of fun things that we can learn about. We've also found out about resource concerns and fallen trees on the water trail that need to be addressed. So it's been a great way to interact with the public, for us to learn as well, and for us to build up that archive of visual content. Here's our annual reports. I've in recent years moved to that just one big picture on the cover. I like that. As you can see, for the watershed district side of things, I like to focus more on the resource. On the SWCD side, I try to focus more on the staff in the field, doing doing work, just kind of keep them separate themes. But the one in the upper left for the watershed district, that was a Cedar Scenes, publicly submitted photo to us. Most of the other ones are ones I've taken, but again, it's a great way to add to your library to communicate. And this is important because I really strongly believe, even though my writing is my background, that you want to show, don't just tell. And these photos help, say to people, this is worth saving, this is worth protecting, improving, way easier than, trying to write it out for them to try to understand where you're coming from. Look at the beauty of this. Let's try to make it even better. Or how about you try out going out on the river, paddling it, and experience it for yourself if you haven't yet. Some people I know from doing this communication will doubt if I filtered the water to look more blue than what they perceive from when they're driving by it or over it on a bridge, and that's the thing. Like I've had to tell them, get down close to the water. You can actually see the bottom of it. Up on the roadway, it might look more brown in the summertime than it seems like in this photo, but that's the thing. Get different perspectives and encourage people to see the river from a different way. Just to note, I think visuals help the public understand and support our work better, and also elected leaders. When our previous legislators worked a lot with Representative Poppy and Senator Sparks, helped us get that state water trail designation. They loved getting our annual reports. Justin would bring them up in bulk, and it would be a nice communication piece for them to hand out to fellow legislators and other legislative staff, to especially help them in advocating for our needs, including bonding money for our upland storage projects. Annual reports, they can go online to, like I mentioned earlier, issue.com. You can also do special just handouts, maybe on a topic or a project. And as you can see, you can scroll through it nicely, just like a regular magazine. You can zoom in, things don't get fuzzy like other ways of sharing files. So that is a great way to, again, because your printed material costs money, whether you mail it or just print it off and offer it for free. It also has a shelf life. Somebody takes it, they might read it and then throw it away. The digital version has a much longer life. That's easier to share, obviously, online and in numerous ways on your website, e-newsletter, social media. Just quickly, free. Use your government card, your government, to get media to partner with you. Other organizations to partner with you to hopefully for free or in-kind services. The kayak giveaway with local business is a nice partnership. And just, like the radio show it's free to us, again, because we're government. We used to do a monthly newspaper column, should try to revisit that again, but a lot of this can be too much work too. So do what you can, but again, you don't expect that you always have to pay for it, especially when we're government. Media releases, that's a whole nother presentation, but medium.com is where and I learned that from a Bowser person, as far as a great way to visually bring your media releases to life better than a Word document. And it's formatted for smartphones and desktop computers. And then again, it's a nice, quick, easy way, a link to get people to see all your different articles and media releases. And those are a whole variety of them. I mean, that you can have topics for. things that you are involved with directly and other things you're not involved with directly. Like for us, it was a gas plant mitigation project between a private business and the MPCA on this involving the Cedar River. And we were the leader to communicate about it. So I kind of put on my newspaper reporter hat again and led that. But all in all, MPCA, the private business, they're all happy with working together to communicate a success story of cleaning up the Cedar River from pollution from over a century ago. Collaborations, projects, all sorts of different things. You can localize state and national news to your watershed district as well. And the power of video. We have our YouTube channel, and on it we have drone. I'll just get some of these images going so you can quickly see some examples of it. I've gotten into using Filmora. It's a video editing program that is pretty easy to use to communicate some different things. We did a fundraiser for that Paint the Town Pink I mentioned earlier. We had some staff members who've been affected by cancer. James here that I'm showing right now, he lost his mother-in-law to breast cancer. So both of them love ice fishing. Both of them been affected by breast cancer, and it's a breast cancer research fundraiser. So how can we fit in, especially in a COVID year when they lost a lot of big fundraisers? Well, why not come up with an event? These two guys who talk about ice fishing, see put up or shut up time, who can ice fish the best. And we lucked out that it was a really close contest and they actually caught fish, which is not a guarantee down here. I've also used an underwater GoPro. I think for watershed districts, I would highly recommend getting one, investing in one of these. They've been highly popular with our public. To see the different views you don't usually get. It's a safe way to hover over water like I did with this one. And to quickly show you a better example of springs too, to show how much of a different look it can be underwater. So we use drone, underwater GoPros, and then the video editing programming. It can all help really tell our story a lot better, whether it's just for fun or whether it's to tell, bring a media release to life. And sorry, I'll wrap up here quickly. Again, just over communicate, just try to get in the public eye. Here are some examples, Justin and myself, paddling down the Cedar River with our local newspaper that does every other month. They do a really high quality magazine on living in our area. So we took the time because this is a great way to highlight our resource and show that we also not only work to improve it, but we also enjoy it. Teaming up with our local artwork center, a nonprofit group, to have some of the images we have about the watershed to share them, but also get others in our watershed to submit work that's related to it. Show something a scene from our local river. That's something I should emphasize with the Cedar scenes, is that everybody can submit something. It just has to show water from our watershed. So you get the kind of restriction on it that it's all about, your watershed. And then Let's Go Minnesota, again, our KSMQ public TV station. I'm sure they've been up in some of the watersheds represented on here. They've done a statewide program that's now going to be aired nationally, I think. And one of them was going down the Cedar River State Water Trail. So myself and two other colleagues helped support that and figure out the logistics and made it happen so that, again, we could have some really high quality video programming about our state water trail and the work we're doing to support it. With that, I'll be quiet and take any questions if anybody has anything.
Well, I do see a comment here, Tim, from Grace Butler at 9 Mile Creek, and she says she loves the enthusiasm and knowledge provided by this presentation and thanks you. And I completely agree. That's why I was so excited to have you here, because I knew this would be an energizing presentation. And when we're this energetic and telling our stories, the legislators are attracted to that too. I mean, they are automatically going to think about you guys when they have a water question and reach out to you, and that just builds bigger and bigger. So that's fantastic. I do have a question here too about, will we be able to get copies of these presentations? And we do. You'll share that with us, Tim?
You bet. And I can send a bunch of links to for some of the examples I talked about. Like.
Okay, great.
And some templates too, if people want to not have to start from scratch on some of the stuff like our annual reports and media releases.
Great. And we are recording this, and it will be available on demand if you want to watch it again. So please do that. Or if you have staff that aren't attending today that you think should see this, send them to the link also. That'll be great. So we will send out a release here so that everybody can get all of that information. And Joe has a question. Is the underwater GoPro actually video under the water or surface water?
Yeah, so my first example, I forgot I did not go underwater for that clip. I did while I was out there. I use a 10-foot expandable rod that you make sure you securely put your GoPro on it. But for that example, then I don't have to worry about, I can reach places that I can't venture out onto, especially on ice, or get different perspectives just above the water very safely without having to worry about ruining my smartphone. The second one I showed of a spring underwater, that is, yeah, directly putting that GoPro underwater. You can still hear the sounds too. It does capture the audio. Another better one I have is from a spring-fed pond in our biggest park that feeds into a stream we just got stocked for rainbow trout by DNR last year. And I'm excited to use that now this year. I didn't have it a year ago, but when they stock it again, they put some of them in that pond and it's crystal clear. So I'm really excited to get that underwater perspective, because when it's that clear and the sun hits it, it really illuminates things. So those have been very, very popular with the public. And now I've just gotten, if you know anybody with old time film showing some of your local water resources, I've just been able to get connected with somebody like that with 1940s images of our river that are pretty unique. People skating on it, even with a speedboat on one of them. So it's another one that people are really drawn to, history and just different perspectives they don't get otherwise, like underwater.
Great. Well, I was telling Tim when we were getting ready for this that I actually remember the first time I came across their Facebook page. I know it was about 5 years ago because I was working at the Yellow Medicine at the time, and it was a video of water trickling down the river, and it was a minute, and it was so peaceful. And I remember just watching it going, oh my gosh, this is an amazing marketing tool to just show this video of how beautiful our resources are. And it made an impact me so much that I still remember where I was sitting and whatnot. So these things, you never know when it's going to impact someone, and you'll gain credibility and people will remember. So fantastic job to you both. We appreciate the information. Does anybody else have anything they want to share here, or any last questions?
I did just share a bunch of links on the chat side. Hopefully those links come through okay, but if anybody needs anything, just feel free to contact me too. I think something got cut off, so I'll post another one here too.
Okay. Yeah, it's not coming up on my chat, but we'll make sure that we get that to everybody.
Oh, I think I did a direct message. Sorry.
Okay.
To Maddie.
That works. Well, thank you again. And I think what we'll do next is we will transition to our legislative update with our lobbyist, Ray Bone. And if you need to get up and grab a drink, obviously that it's so much easier when it's virtual, but go and do that, and we will get situated and start with Ray. Yep, now all those links came through. That's okay. Great. Thanks again, Tim and Justin, and we look forward to continuing to work with you. And one of these days, we'll see you at the Capitol, I'm sure.
All right. Thanks a lot for the invitation.
Yeah, thank you. All right. There's Ray. All right, I think you can get started, Ray. Ray Bone, our lobbyist, and has been with us for many years. It's been an interesting year, that's for sure. We're learning a lot of good things this year. So why don't you go ahead?
Hi, Emily. Maddie, now this is Ray Bone, your lobbyist, and I am here to give you a update on where we're at with legislation. First of all, I'd like to say that Justin is right on with his comments. as is Tim. You know, I used to tell people, you know, if you don't tell your story, no one else will. I think some of the old timers will remember me saying that. But, and in terms of what Justin said, it's all about personal relations. And this year kind of emphasizes that more than ever with the challenges lobbyists have in a COVID-related world, COVID-related session, more precisely. The COVID pandemic has certainly present a number of new challenges. I started the session by going to a couple of seminars for beginning lobbyists. Even though I've been in the business over almost 4 decades, it was all new. It's a whole new ball game in terms of how you try to lobby this year. I haven't been to inside the Capitol since I think March 14th of last year. So everything has to be done with your electronic devices, telephones, and all that. You know, Justin talked about relating personal experiences of your work. Well, I can relate to you. I'm sitting in front of 4 electronic devices. I have one laptop going that I'm have been listening to the environmental legacy bill or the environmental policy bill in the Senate to see what they're up to following that. Of course, I've been listening to Emily and the seminar, what's been said there. And then I've been using my desktop computer to examine the amendments that were coming up in the committee. And then in addition to that, I'm hoping that telephone doesn't ring. So that's kind of the dilemma, or kind of what you're facing every day. Sometimes you're listening to 2 committees at the same time on electronics and then trying to figure out the amendments and everything else. So it is very, very different than anything I've ever faced before. The only saving grace is that I'm not the only one. Just about everybody else is. And typically for the legislators where we have been able to develop relationships, we have been able to contact them and talk with them, you know, get the client in to talk to them. But if there's a newer legislator that you haven't developed those relationships with, it's just about impossible to get their attention to talk with them and try to give them a message or whatever. So one of the things also we have found it interesting in dealing with is the hearing process. It's all done electronically, pretty much 98% is electronically. And you know, you have to sign up to testify electronically. And actually, in some ways, I think it's going better than I thought it would. But it still has obviously communication difficulties because normally you're relegated to only like 3 to 5 minutes to get your point across. And sometimes life is a lot more complicated and these issues are a lot more complicated than that. So it's really hard to, again, to carry your message forward. One of the things too is we were told early on that the chairs, the leadership did not want the chairs dealing with a lot of controversial issues other than what they wanted or the committee chair wanted. So they weren't really willing to hear too many controversial issues because it would eat up all their committee time and they weren't willing to give up that time. And what was different this year than years past is they only had an 1.5-hour time slot and that was it. And now just recently they've been this last week or week and a half, they've actually now extended their meetings into the evening for another hour and a half. So that's given them a little more time to hear additional bills, but not much. So as a result, there haven't been the normal ton of bills that are heard. And normally when that happens, that means that on the floor, when the omnibus bills come through, we'll see a ton of amendments come through as well, be offered on the floor. Because if legislators don't get a chance to have their bill heard, they will have it heard on the floor to a large degree. But anyway, in terms of where we're at right now with the session, the policy bills, omnibus policy bills are just starting to be discussed, is what I'm trying to say. And like I say, the environment policy bill was up today in the Senate Legacy Committee and Policy Committee. I think next week we're going to start seeing seeing a policy bill, if there is one in the House, and that's the question: will there be a policy bill in the House, or will Chair Hansen put the House and the policy and the finance bill together, like I think he has in the past? And sometimes you don't know the answer to that until they come out. But regardless, we will be watching them and ensuring that that anything we need to cover is covered. And for example, in the policy bill in the Senate, it does have the water storage bill, one of the bills in it, regarding the Minnesota River Basin. And we had a discussion this morning about some of the issues behind that water storage and how it may get confused with flood hazard mitigation. And so we're trying to iron out maybe some of the language so that we don't have that confusion or frankly competition for the same pot of money. So those are the kinds of things that we have been watching. We've talked to 2 tax committee chairs about the general levy, fund levy increase. We floated a proposal where, they certainly weren't happy with us coming in and suggesting we double our increase from 250 to 500, that cap. There seemed to be a bit more interest in if we would present value the 250, which would end up in today's dollars being about 370,000 instead of the 250s. But even that, we haven't been able to get a bite from either committee. In fact, Chair Marquardt in the House told us flat out that his committee would not be passing any property tax increases this year. And I don't think it's far for me to say that while we didn't get a big reaction, we got no reaction in the Senate. So that being the case, I'm assuming that they're just not gonna do any tax increases as it relates to property tax anyway. And if they do, and it's not us, we're gonna be calling them on it. But meanwhile, we intend on getting our bill thrown in the hopper, as they say, and so that we have something to talk about over the summer and fall. And that's where Justin's presentation, I think, comes in as very, very relevant. Another thing that I have to mention is that one of the things we hinted at is maybe we should get some of that capacity funding like the SWCDs do, at least those watershed districts that could prove that they really need the money. And that was a kind of a non-starter as well, which doesn't surprise us. The other thing, the Clean Water Fund bills, they're just starting to hear those. They in the full committees. This morning they heard House File 639, which is Hansen's bill, and that's going to be will be put into the Clean Water Legacy bill in the House. And the difference between that bill and the bill that the Clean Water Fund recommended is that the governor, as a result of the February forecast, which turned out to be pretty good on a positive level, what happened was that there was 36 million that was still in the fund according to the new forecast. So Rick Hansen spread that out, and he basically went ahead and made his own recommendations on that 36 million. The, the recommendations for his bill pretty much follows, I think, what the board recommended. He did do something different with the SWCDs though, however. He funded them the first year, but the second year, he took the 12 million and invested it in programs for the SWCDs, three different programs at $4 million apiece. And not to be used as capacity money, but actually programming. So Rick does not, Chair Hansen does not like this money going to the SWCDs. I don't think the SWCDs like it, but and not many people like it, but yet the legislature hasn't been able to find out a way to fund it. Now, Chair Hansen, what he did is he put in a provision to add $25 to transaction cost when you buy and sell homes for your deed tax. And then that fee would go to the local county, which then would through some formula match it up with the SWCDs. I don't know if that's going to survive. My guess is that it probably won't, but at least he's got something in there to keep debating the issue when he gets to conference committee. Water storage issue, I think we touched on that. There's 3 different bills out there. I think we just want to make sure that whatever's passed, that it's done in a way where it doesn't really affect any of our other programs like flood hazard mitigation, because that could really cause some serious problems. And we've talked to legislators and they are listening to us on that. One bill that we did put forward was the drainage bill clarification. That came about primarily as a result of the Heron Lake Watershed District basically getting bullied, I think, by the Jackson County probably board into giving up some of their authorities as it relates to drainage ditches. We believe this is a very serious issue, and the reason it's serious is that if other counties use the excuse that they couldn't afford to do the ditches and they wouldn't be willing to bond, for example, or pay for these ditches, that could really upset the apple cart as it relates to drainage across the state. And once one does it, that means people are watching that and it can be done again. So purpose of our bill is to get that up and make it an issue at the legislature so that presumably we can get some of these issues. And it's not just that issue. There's a lot of issues that I've been hearing about for the last 25 years on that whole section of law. And I think what we got to do is we got to come to some conclusions on some of those and make sure, for example, that people, watershed districts, when they're transferred a ditch, do have access to what the fund balance is, do have access to the records. So there's a lot of things like that that need to be clarified and put in maybe into law as well. You assume if you transfer the ditch, you're going to get the account, drainage fund account for that ditch, and that doesn't always happen, as an example. So there's work that needs to be done, to clean that arena up, that part of law. And frankly, I was telling the legislator today that one of the issues is that what they just did really goes exactly the opposite of where state policy is going in terms of one watershed, one plan. The reason they give watershed districts the authority over improved and new ditches when they happen was because they obviously wanted, the legislature at that time wanted to establish policy that water is better managed on a watershed basis. And that's why they wanted the watersheds to take over those ditches or be the authority for the ditches if it's new or improved. But some counties are having a tough time letting that go. And we need to have a conversation. The bill, we're hoping to get the bill introduced in the Senate as well. That just increases the likelihood that we'll get some cooperation this summer and fall to really dive in and work on these issues and get some agreement on them, which then we can take to the Drainage Task Force to look at, as well as the legislature. Emily talked about the consolidation bill, and I don't think I really have much more to say about that. We also have those miscellaneous bills, Representative Green's bills dealing with the eliminating eminent domain and turning watershed districts into departments of the counties by appointing all county commissioners. I've not really heard much on those bills at all. No one's asked me about them. Have heard still there's a lingering issue out there with our assessment authority, taxing authority. Scott, you'll be happy to know that they're still talking about Sauk River in the legislature. So anything you can do this summer to address those issues, I think would be helpful. We had one other issue that we actually stopped before it got to the Capitol, and that was with the Minnesota Township Association. They were concerned about who was going to pay for this culvert in one of their townships that evidently had been part of the drainage ditch, and we had to clarify some points of the law to them. And after a couple of long discussions with them, we're able to convince them that if it was part of the drainage ditch, then and they messed around with that culvert, then they probably have to pay for it. But anyway, we sent them on their way down to Bowser and told them they needed to work with Bowser on that issue with the drainage authority, the county drainage authority they were dealing with. So we were able, I think, to prevent the piece of legislation that wouldn't have been good. So with that, I don't know, Emily, is there anything else I may have forgotten to address? But I think that's kind of where we're at. We've had over 2,000 bills introduced, and at this time, in a normal year, probably would be close to the same amount, maybe a little bit more. But again, I think the key is we haven't had that many heard, and that's one of the real keys. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions, or Emily, if you have any comments you want to make, anything I've forgotten to mention, or.
No, I think you grabbed all the points that I had noted down as well. Wait a minute. Dennis Carl's hand is up. All right.
Yes, this is really for Emily, Ray, and the entire MAUD board. As I looked through the bills that were sent to me that are out there, it seemed the vast majority of those bills were either designed to increase SWCD's funding, secure funding for them, make them an absolutely integral part of all sorts of things. And there was an extreme lack of bills being sponsored that did any of those things for watershed districts. It concerns me, and I would think other members, how do we change this narrative? What can the MAUD board and our lobbyists do? It's certainly a matter, I understand that trying to get money as this COVID thing runs down, I wouldn't say that it would be a possibility. But obviously a lot of people seem, judging by the bills, to have a problem with watershed districts. And what can be done to change that narrative? I'll wait for an answer.
Well, I mean, I'd be happy to respond to it. One of the things, we respond to what your needs are. And if you have a program if you have something you want to do, we're more than happy to get it drafted and try to get it passed if that's what the watershed districts vote on, and that's what the board agrees to. So I think one of the things that I've always noted, Dennis, is that Bowser works much more closely with the SWCDs than they do us. The SWCDs are much more dependent on Bowser and the state than necessarily watershed districts. And I think that in and of itself is a great difference between us and the SWCDs. And as a result, maybe we don't ask for enough money all the time from or help from Bowser specifically. But I guess my question is, do we want to? We're much more independent than them. And I know that watershed districts frustrate Bowser more so than probably any other group because of our independence. There's really not much of a way that they can get a handle on us when it gets right down to it, because we run our own shops, and they keep trying to impose more bureaucracy on us. It seems like every year. We have access to the clean water funds as much as what's available. So I guess I would challenge you folks a little bit to tell us how we can try to get more money for you, and we'd be more than happy. Should have some discussion so that there's agreement with the members, and then once the members in agreement, then we can start formulating a plan, to go get that money. And irrespective of whether Bowser likes it or doesn't like it or whatever. But I think there's things we could do, but it's much more fun playing offense than it is defense. And in some ways, or many ways, it's much more rewarding as well. So I think we need to get a little more creative in terms of how the state can help us. And for example, like right now, there's a flood of money coming in on the COVID bill just passed by Congress and signed by the president. I mean, each county is going to get $1 million. $1 million each county. That's what I read in the paper the other day. I don't know if it's true or not, but that's what I read. Why can't we latch onto some of that money as an example? It seems to me that that's something we ought to be discussing and trying to figure out how we can get some of that money so that we can, upgrade our infrastructures if there's a need, or create new infrastructures if there's a need, and try to get some federal help.
I'd like to jump in here for a second. Dennis, one of the things that I've been thinking about, and I think the board is going to be taking up, is how do we better sell the differences between watershed districts and SWCDs and the value that we bring to the table. So if we can come up with some kind of cheat sheet or newsletter or something that everyone can take back to their representatives and senators and start doing, like Justin and Tim said, get a personal relationship and start selling it on the home front.
I appreciate both those answers. However, I hate to be trying to be a political analyst here, but the same sort of conservative movement that removed a Colin Peterson from the legislature, rural Minnesota, it appears to me, is becoming more and more conservative in its outlook as to government services, what they wish to make funding for. So it seems that these bills and so on that come forward reflect this, let's knock some of the pins of government down a little bit, watershed districts being among them. I don't think metro watersheds face the same sort of thing. it cannot be a coincidence that outstate Minnesota galvanized more strongly than it had 4 years ago in the recent November election to this less government, we don't want to be told what to do. There are whole coalitions of counties here in northern Minnesota that want to band together and call themselves second right amendment sanctuary counties. And so that gun laws couldn't be enforced in our county. Well, they can't do that. It isn't going to work. They have to uphold the laws of Minnesota. But that sort of thinking is having an effect, I believe, on rural watershed districts. And I thank you for your response. You don't even have to respond to my minor tirade here. And to those I alienated, so be it.
Can I
And
make
then
one
is-
comment?
Oh.
I just wanted to make, so I'm on Bowser Board and I serve on committees. And I have heard staff, not a lot, but on a couple occasions, refer to watershed districts as having deep pockets. So I think there's a perception there that we can, and I've countered that. I said, no, I mean, we're appointed by county commissioners and we're at the mercy of politics too. So it doesn't always work to that benefit for those, some of us. But so that was just the point I wanted to make, but I think Justin's presentation and some strategic thinking about how we develop relationships might be helpful. And Mary, you may have more comments about our relationship with Bowser.
Not today.
Dennis, if I could just interject. No, I mean, you're right. And we can feel that when we go to the Capitol and ask a really good friend of watershed districts if he would help us get a little increase in our levy amount. And he says, no, my committee has decided, this is a Democrat, my committee has decided we're not doing any property tax increases. Well, that's a direct reflection, I think, of what people are thinking around the state. And it's not necessarily just in rural Minnesota, it's probably stronger in rural Minnesota, but there is that, as we all know, there is that kind of thinking going on right now, and we have to buck that. Remember, that's at the Capitol too, so we have to buck that as well. That's why we got to come up with creative ways to get more money to rural watershed districts. And I think some of the things, as I mentioned, that COVID money that's coming in, is there a way we can make a plea for that money? As an example.
Yeah, I'm gonna grab Grace next. The other thing I wanted to mention about all of the SWCD bills, taking the capacity money out of the Clean Water Fund aggravated everyone. They talked about how can we fund SWCDs and not give them taxing authority. They talked about that nearly every single month last year at the Legislative Water Commission, which is the representatives and the senators. Every single month, the environmental groups were coming up with ideas. The environmental groups had their own work groups trying to solve this problem. So even if if all of the SWCD staff and association staff were out going there, they didn't even need to do anything this year. There was so much momentum, and it was all anger driven from, why are we using the sales tax money that's supposed to be for other stuff? Why are we using it here? And so, but then people were like, well, but they do good work. So, but we don't want to give them taxing authority. Well, so it was just this perfect storm. And so I think part of that is coming from that too. But anyways, let's move on to a different question. I see Grace, you had your hand up. Do you still have a question? Now it's down.
I do. I want to just give a summary, and I will talk to Jackie about process, but I don't want to miss the opportunity to review this session. And I feel like if I start that conversation with Jackie, like you and Ray might not hear me. I think we need to establish a mod manager that's in charge of each one of these bills. Meaning, I wouldn't mind hearing from the manager about raising the levy for instance, and how I can help them and what the talking points are to my urban person. But, you know, I'm not given that information, and I can't get back to them and say, yeah, I talked with my 3 people here. They're aware of it. They're on board, but I need to push back and tell you that my watershed didn't raise our tax. Messaging is strong all throughout, you know, even where I'm at. And so I think it would help the dialogue. I'm discouraged about the process still about my salt bill, and I'll just put that out as an example. I'm getting no feedback. So I can tell you that it's not in play anymore. It did not get out of either environmental committee. I need to hear that as the person that was kind of really caring and wanting to work on this. And I need to get input from either you or Ray on, are there things I need to fix for next year, or did it just not get out because it's a political ball? It's just not clean and smooth and easy? Or did it not get out because there's something I need to meet with environmental groups or maybe the lawyers about and try to fix and write the language so we're ready for next year? I need more input on how to fix it for next year. And I need to know as it's happening when my bill is dead, because I'm finding out from other organizations that, you know, this bill is dead this year. Okay, that's fine, but I'm the last to hear from the organization that I'm hoping is helping me. So it's not critical, but I think we need to find a better way to support each other, maybe have a manager in charge of each one of these pieces. And so we can cross support each other, rural, urban. And my best suggestion to you is to put a manager that's willing to be in charge and the lead to communicate behind you. But then they need to get these pieces of information, like you need to tell me 3 things I need to fix about it in focus groups before it comes up next year. Is there something I can do to work on this? And I'm missing that because we are not really truly political animals. We are not used to trying to work with the legislature. You do. And so you can just give me better advice. And so I don't need you to discuss it. I need to get this idea to Jackie Anderson, and I will, but I don't want to lose your input on this legislative session in that capacity. Because I need to know, why did the salt bill die? Do you know, is there something I need to fix? And so I'm just bringing it forward from that reason, and I will work with Jackie because I think everyone's doing a great job. Ray, I watched both of your videos. I like them. They're short and sweet, but it really helped me understand the legislative session. I think we're doing a lot right. I want to commend you. I'm just telling you where it's not working for me or there's a disconnect. I don't know if we still have a bill that I need to tell my people, hey, you need to help move this forward. Don't lose it. It's really important. It's still in play. And if I knew that, I could help more. So there's that. Thanks.
Thanks,
Yes, and
Grace.
I'd be very willing to work with you on that, Grace. No problem. Your biggest issue is are the lawyers.
And well, what I had also heard, Sue Nissen, I heard her speak this year. You know, she's the Stop Oversalting woman, phenomenal leader on that. And they asked her, why aren't you doing much on this bill this year? And she said, you know what? We're just going to focus on education because we're tired, we're exhausted, we're all volunteers, and we're out of steam. We're out of resources. And they gave a valiant effort on that. And it's, you know, this bill is still there. We have heard also that it's probably dead, but it's never dead until the second year is over. But it's a good point. Tara has written a question about, can we go back to written updates? And we used to get several of them. And absolutely, yeah, I used to write all of those, and it took at least 20 hours a week just to be able to do that. This year, I have not put a lot of hours into tracking all those bills, writing all of that up and providing all of that, because I have been working on other issues, more of the state admin issues. But the mod board, we did realize that we're in a position where we have too many priorities on our plate, and we need to go back and figure out, you know, what is going to be our most important things that we allocate resources for. And we are meeting actually tomorrow to have some good discussion about that. Just to compare, the MASWCD, they have 3 full-time staff, plus they hire a lobbying firm. The Red River Basin, they spend more than double on their investment on their lobbying. And of course they don't, and they've got a second person now to help just track that. Even Bowser has multiple people just to track legislation and do that. We have not invested in the same number of man hours, and you can only do so much. I would love to be able to do and provide all of that, but we just need to figure out if that is the most important thing right now, then other things need to go by the wayside. And we kind of, I know I wanted to do everything personally, or it just, when you know things can get done and can get done well, it's easy to want to do all those things, and then you realize you just only have so many hours in the day. So that discussion is actively happening, and look for more direction and answers to that. Ruth mentioned here, Ruth Schaefer from the Middle Fort Crow. She's lived in Candy, Ojai County since 1989. When we had a Democratic House rep and Senate, we had funding for environmental concerns in our area. Not so much now that we both switched to Republican members. Yep, I think what Dennis brought up and what Ruth points out here, there's definitely some shifts there, and smaller government and whatnot definitely is an issue out there. Yeah, I was interesting when the tax chair said that. He said straight up, the Republicans don't want to raise any taxes, and the Democrats don't want to raise property taxes, because in COVID, that's a fixed number for folks. And the older people who are on fixed incomes, they don't want to see that number go up. People that have lost their jobs, are impacted by COVID, they don't want that number to go up. They'll support other taxes, but they don't want to support property taxes. And that's where our increase comes from. So I thought it was interesting. I guess it caught me off guard a little bit. It makes sense. He said, just so you know, that's what you're dealing with. So. And that's why we, as MAUD at the convention this last year, we did a pre-conference workshop on sharing ideas, how we can finance our work without depending on an increase in that levy. And hopefully we can continue to share good ideas, because we certainly have watershed districts in the rural areas that have very large budgets and have figured out how to make that work. But with that, and then, is there any other hands raised, do you see, Maddie? Or other questions? I'm also watching, we have Rick Hansen, Chair Hansen, coming in at 3 o'clock here, and it is 3 right now. Grace also mentions property taxes also tied to housing and potential housing loss. Absolutely.
I don't see any raised hands, and I don't see that Rick has signed on yet, but you may want to just ask, because I do see there's a couple participants whose information we were unsure of. So I don't know if Rick is on yet.
Could I just add something quick?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Let's not forget, we are dealing in the era of COVID, and everything takes so much longer. I mean, it took us over 3.5 weeks to get a meeting with one committee chair, where typically I could have stopped by and talked to that committee chair, caught him in their office, and spent 15 minutes talking to him, and would have had it done. So the work is just, it seems like it's increased, because you have to do everything by electronic. And it really slows things down. I mean, and that's an understatement, with a lot more work. So instead of catching someone, in the lobby, like that's what we're called, lobbyists, right? You can't catch them in a lobby anymore. So it's really extremely difficult, just so you know. So don't, I think the fact that we're able to protect ourselves from any shenanigans probably should be our first priority. And that's, that being said, I just think we need to keep that in mind when we do our analysis of these things, that this is a very, very unique time. Probably never to be repeated. Hopefully.
I will say the best thing about it is you can watch every single hearing and you have access to it from your home or whatever. Before there was only 2 channels and there would be 4 to 8 hearings going on at any given time. So now you absolutely, and you can, they're all saved. You can go back and watch them so you can exactly hear what the conversation is. And that's a huge improvement. I hope they don't stop doing that. And I will say one other thing about the SWCD funding, I do think, I think this is an opportunity, like when Justin talked about, you know, what's the hot topic? And I think we need to ride that wave right now. And I have been repeatedly saying with the SWCD capacity funds, we need strong local governments that have adequate capacity to do their job. Yes, SWCDs need capacity fund. We need our ability to be able to raise our levy more than once every 20 years. You know, we all need capacity. So every time someone brings that issue up to me, I turn it back and say, you know what, we all need capacity. Here's our situation. And so, and I think making sure that we really clearly identify the role of each, and that'll be a talking point I make tomorrow and that Leanne makes from MASWCD during our hearing. We definitely have unique roles, complementary roles, and just need both to be strong. I'm wondering, Ray, should I see if I can reach out to see where Chair Hansen is? I know he had a committee hearing that was going to go until 2:30. And he was going to try and grab us right after.
You may want to just email Peter quickly.
Okay. Oh, I do want to mention those annual reports. If you have paper copies of those annual reports, please, please, please send them to your representatives and senators and send me a copy. Over the last 3-4 years, I think I have got less than a handful of those reports, and I would absolutely love to have a stack of those to look at and draw from. Okay. So when Chair Hansen gets here, we will have him give him the floor, and then be prepared with some questions that you'd like to ask him. He is the chair. He is the House Chair of the Environmental Committee.
Policy and Finance. Well, I'm going to sign off, Emily. I got a 3 o'clock I have to watch. I'm sorry.
Can you put, okay.
You want me to do something?
If you could mute for a second or just hang on.
Okay, I will.
Should we take a 5-10 minute break?
Yeah, let's do that. And I will call the office and see.
So we'll come back at 3:15 p.m.
All right.
Go grab a
No,
snack.
I
use the
wouldn't
restroom.
stray too far. If he comes back on, he'll have to get right on and get off.
Okay.
So
The tricky part is the second deadline is in 2 days.
yeah.
When I realized how busy the legislators were, I was like, why didn't I think through that a little bit further? I was thinking, oh, if we really need a push, it'd be a good week to have our legislative event. But then I realized yesterday that MASWCD did the exact same thing. They're having their event tomorrow morning. So we were thinking along the same lines. There's really never a perfect time to have this event, but Oh, here I have, okay.
Emily, I know that when I was in college, if a professor was late for class, if it was an assistant professor, we give him 10 minutes and we were out of there.
Mm-hmm.
But if it's the full professor, you waited. He's like a full professor. He's the chair of the committee. So anyway,
Yeah, I did. I sent his legislative assistant a text message and an email to see where he's at, because they definitely confirmed that they were going to be here. But
well, sometimes they don't have control over their own schedule too.
right. What we could maybe do too is grab several chairs. There were several of the environment chairs and minority chairs said they definitely were interested in meeting with us. They just couldn't do it this week. We could maybe grab them later in the session or even over the summer and visit with them too.
Would there
And
be interest?
have a Zoom.
Would they be interested? Our folks be interested in that in the future?
We can model how we're saying connect all year round, right?
Yeah, right. There you go.
Tim, you're the events chair. What do you think?
Yeah, we can try if we can get them to show up.
Oh no, I think when they have more time, they will definitely make time for us. They are the ones that we were asking are definitely the water passionate legislators, and
So, but yeah, it'd be nice, or maybe even a set schedule
Mhm.
once or twice a month. So,
All right. Well, I'm not getting responses from emails or text messages here, so I think maybe we should assume that it's they're kind of like they're once they miss one appointment, they're just all backed up every 15-minute slot. So I think we can call it. Oh. Oh, I just got a message back. He will be on in just a minute here. I have to resend them the link.
That's why we wait for full professors.
Right. Maddie, can you, let's see. Trying to figure out how to get my link as I'm, nothing like doing this stuff live.
Do you want me to send you the Zoom link?
Yeah, send me the Zoom link quick and then I'll grab it. Of course, it's in about.
Okay.
Okay.
Hello, Representative.
Hello.
Thank you so much. We were just finishing up going over our platform, talking about the session and talking about ways we can interact with our legislators all year long. I was wondering if you wanted to start with just share a few words or.
Sure. And sorry for the delay. It was not on my calendar and I'm not sure what happened with Zooming here, but thank you all for the work you do. Maybe just a little bit on communication of ways that people can communicate now, because I'm in my office and there are about 4 other people on my floor. There's no staff in. Staff are working from home, and it's very difficult to get, if it's not email or texting or Facebook Messenger or Twitter messaging, it's hard to get it in front of a legislator. And I'm getting probably, some members are getting hundreds of emails today. When you've been here a little longer, you get fewer, because people kind of know where your positions are. But the amount of spam that's coming in is massive. So I spend a lot of time, time is spent just removing the spam that's in the emails. And so I would, depending on your legislator and what they prefer, Facebook Messenger or Twitter Messenger, or if you have their text number, if you have their phone number for texting, short, simple messages about, what about this bill or what's going on. It's not good for a conversation, but it's good for an alert to keep something in front of a member. So I don't know if that's what you're looking for, but that would be some advice I would give just in communication. But that it's very difficult to communicate now, and even in your communities, members usually run into their representative, and it's harder to do that now. So with Zooming, hopefully we're out of this relatively soon, and we can come back to some normal communication. I think we will still have Zoom meetings. I think that there are members who have been able to testify remotely that would not normally be able to come into the Capitol. And I think that we will still keep that. I think the changes with social media also are not going to be reversed. They're going to continue. So it's just a variety of platforms that people are going to be getting information on. The other issue is just response from your member. If you're not hearing instantly or within a day or two, that's not unusual. I know that I and many members are finally clearing emails like on a Saturday or Sunday, that we are tied up from 7:30 in the morning to depending on whether we have a floor session into the evening. And like tonight, we have Ways and Means. We may be going till 8 or 9 tonight. So there just isn't that time. We can multitask, and that's where the social media messages that pop up, and on an alert of check out this bill or what's happening. That's how communication is occurring. But in-depth review and going through the emails, it's taking members. You see a lot of activity early in the morning, late at night, and on the weekends, because that literally is the only time that we can get a response.
Mm-hmm. One of our top issue for years has been being able to increase our general levy. And of course, the SWCDs for years have been trying to figure out how to get capacity. And all of our local governments need to, be able to raise revenue. What are you seeing? Why are both organizations having such a hard time just being able to secure some funding? And do you have what's your feedback on that?
The easiest thing to do at the legislature is to say no.
Mm-hmm.
A no is easy. Yes is hard. And so, and trying something, it's easy to say no. And the status quo is very resilient. And what happens is the status quo isn't sufficient anymore, whether it's funding or we have law that doesn't apply anymore. I mean, we have things that were passed 30 or 40 years ago in a different world. And we were just talking about communication. You know, we have laws that are in a world, you know, that were passed in a world before the communication options that we have now. And so how we do business is different. And Minnesota law, and I think other states, it's very hard for it to catch up. You know, we are in the House, we're trying to pass a lot of bills, and, you know, we run into zero. I mean, just, so we have had 191 bills sent to the Environment and Natural Resources Finance Committee. We've heard 53 bills as of yesterday. That was in 22 meetings. If you contrast that with the Senate, you would find a handful of bills, just a handful of bills. And so ideology plays a role here in terms of what do you deal with, and the squeaky wheel only gets so far, right? Some of these things, the wheel's been squeaking for years and people choose not to hear it. But ultimately, you can't deny reality. I mean, the funding, our state is very different than it was even 20 years ago. I mean, in terms of the demographics and the jobs and who is employed where and how that's done, where people live, where they vacation. It's a very different state, and it's going to continue to become more and more different. And the longer we try to rely on systems that were set up many, many years ago that no longer work, the more challenges we're going to have for the future. Because if we can't adapt, we can't evolve, you know, we're not going to thrive. And going back to that comment about the easiest thing you can do is say no. That's a short-sighted view. And I know there's the vision of divided government is good because then you can get compromise. I can tell you there's not any compromise. It's not working. It's not working. It's not working the way it should. And so we're going to need things to move. I mean, you just look at what happened federally here. Things start to move, you know, and I kind of look at this like plate tectonics. You know, you have a lot of, you've got these continents that are moving and shaking, and there's a lot of pressure that built up, and you feel these small tremors, but eventually there are earthquakes that move and there's a dramatic shift. And it would be a lot easier to prepare for those shifts than what we're doing right now. So that's a long answer. The situation is not good where we're at right now. It could be better. I just would say keep trying and keep trying different options. If you watch what we've been doing, we've tried multiple ways of getting the Soil and Water District funding, and there's always people who say no, because the easiest thing to do is say no. And I'll just also throw out, I think that Minnesota during the baby boom era has relied too much on the stakeholder process, because what that has done is led to a consensus-based assumption, and then it is even more powerful to say no. Because if you are the one that everybody else around the table is trying to get to say yes, the easiest thing for you to do is say no, and therefore there's no consensus. So we're going to have to, I think that's a model that has been used everywhere. It's written into law in every part of our state law of a consensus-based stakeholder model. And I think we've got to go now with technology to more of a public model and majority decision-making, because you can't achieve consensus when you have hard ideological lines. You've got to be able to get the majority to pass something with a coalition, building a coalition to a majority rather than building a coalition to unanimity.
Are you hopeful for some good policy work coming out at the end of the session, or?
I think we're here till June. I think we're here till June 30th. I think I think there may be some good things, but it's going to be really challenging and it's not going to be in public. And that's not the way it should be working. But I also believe where we're at right now is we're in a transition period of great change. This pandemic has been, if you look at previous times, this is one of the things that's going to be affecting all of us the rest of our life, and how we adapt to it and how we evolve. The status quo is not sufficient in dealing with crisis. So we have to be able to be more flexible and move to adapt. And so even though in the short few months ahead, there may be great difficulty, I think in the long run, there's going to be great change, in that there will be changes that happen. And that may take 2 years in redistricting, but at some point, you can't deny the pent up demand for reform and renewal. I think that reform is renewal. You can't deny that forever. Otherwise, things just break down. It's like an old car, you got to take it in and get it fixed. And if you just keep thinking that it's going to keep running, sooner or later, things start to break.
Mhm. One thing I realized I could do yesterday is I can go to the committee page and, you can click on all the bills, the 190 bills that have been sent to your committee, and you can sort them by which bills have had the most actions on them. And that I didn't realize I could do that. Discovered that yesterday, and that was eye-opening. Can you give us just a quick update as to what's going on in your committee and what topics are at the top of that list? And people may be surprised.
Well, there's a lot of soil and water topics in there. What we tried to do first was, the way we described it was, you can't go back to the buffet until you've cleaned your plate. So we had a lot of things on the plate last year that never got passed because of the inability to reach compromise. So we passed a number of things that had passed last year, and then we started shifting into the agency bills, and then more recently, in the last couple of weeks, we've been hearing a lot of members' bills, members within the committee, and then members outside of the committee. So we start, Representative Marquardt has a number of watershed district bills that we, generally hear. But we will now hear the targets for our budget. The things that I'm asking for, if there's some additional one-time money, is the Science Museum has a big financial problem because of COVID. It was not eligible for PPP loans, nor was it able to receive any reimbursement from its insurance. So there's a state obligation there. And obviously there's a state obligation with the Minnesota Zoo, which is a state agency, that are in my budget area. So smaller agencies, but big impacts that we've got to figure out how to make sure that they survive and thrive in a new world. So haven't spent a lot of time on those, but those are some of the big questions. And then obviously with the DNR, the LCCMR hearings, science and clean water fund, those have all been important pieces. Air emissions and environmental justice are really important. We haven't spent as much time on air, over the last 20 years as we had previously. So I think that air quality is going to continue to increase in concern, as well as landfill issues are going to be another sleeping giant that isn't going to go away.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thanks for that. I can't imagine that everybody knew that we were going up against the zoo and the Science Museum to get time in front of the committee. Well, I do. Ray does want to thank you for some help, and then we'll let you go. I know your busy schedule is stacked, but Ray, did you want to say a couple things?
Sure, Mr. Chairman, thanks for coming today.
Glad to be here. Sorry
Good.
for I was late.
I just wanted to thank you for your help with that, with the drainage bill the other day. We are having discussions in the Senate now, and we're hoping, number one, that they will introduce it, and number two, that will be the impetus for us to start meeting with the Association of Minnesota Counties, because it seems like, Rick, since I started with the watershed districts, this whole area has been kind of a gray area, And a lot of things have been settled with case law and things like that. But I think that's one of those laws I think that you were talking about earlier, where we really need to look at that and see where we can streamline it. You know, when we have counties that are unwilling to turn over, or they're forced to turn over the ditch, but then they won't tell the drainage authority how much money is in the ditch fund. You know, it gets pretty ridiculous. So we really need to get that straightened out, because one of the things I think, and I know, I'm assuming you agree with that, some of us have worked hard to bring drainage into the 21st century, and with the making it part of drainage management, or I'm sorry, making it part of water management on a watershed basis. And I think we're headed that direction very quickly, but we got to ensure that drainage is part of that process. And your help keeps us moving that direction.
In the bringing things to daylight helps solve things. As Louis Brandeis, who said that sunlight is the best disinfectant, and things fester in the dark. And it's important to have these discussions. And that's one of the challenges during COVID. One way is that we're not having a lot of time to discuss it, but daylighting it. And, whenever you propose any change, you kick the hive, and the forces of the status quo always start buzzing. Now, I like bees, and I don't mind getting stung a little bit, but, they've got to realize that the hive is changing as well, and that a position of no change ever is not a sustainable position.
Right. Well, we appreciate your help.
Yep.
Thank you, Chair Hansen. Thank you so much. And I will take responsibility for messing up the schedule and the invitation. I think that was me. And I know I was supposed to double check, and I didn't double check. So we will let you off the hook for that for sure, because I am now, as I think about it, 95% chance I'm responsible. So I apologize for that, and look forward to continue to work on your bill and watch the work of your committee. You do great work, and we appreciate it.
Thank you for the work you do.
Thank you.
Yep. Bye.
Yeah. Bye. All right. With that, I think we will call this a wrap, unless there's anything else anybody has that they'd like to discuss. Not seeing any hands or anything like that. So with that, thank you so much. Again, remember to continue conversations going with us, and use those connections with your reps on the board. Like I said before, very underutilized. Get those conversations. And I thought one other idea: when you send your annual reports to your legislators, send it to your other watershed districts in your region, or send it to somebody who that you assume has a completely different operation than you, and say, hey, thought you might enjoy seeing what we're doing out here in the Red River Valley or the Metro, saying, hey, thought you might want to see our big impoundment projects we do. Ours are underground, or whatever it is. Share those reports, and look for the next regional meetings in all areas across the state. We'll get that set up and continue conversations there. We're stronger together, and I just really appreciate all of you, and hope you have a fantastic spring.